Hey guys, this is Michael Fomkin. I'm here with Fuji Ruiz, and welcome to Hollywood Mindset TV and the VIP Ignite Live podcast. So, our special guest today is one of the most powerful agents in the world. Okay, this is a live modeling scout. So, for those of you who are interested in modeling, especially high fashion and so forth, this is the right episode to listen to. So, with that thought in mind, Mr. Fuji Ruiz, welcome aboard to Hollywood Mindset TV. How are you doing today?
Good, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing excellent. So, Fuji, so right now, currently, you are the director of Hello Management in New York City. So, tell me a little bit about that. That's like a high fashion agency, commercial. Like, what do you guys kind of handle over there?
Right. Well, first of all, thank you for having me. It's an honor, and I love talking with you guys always. Hello Management is a boutique agency here in New York City, and what we primarily focus on is high fashion, and we kind of go in various other directions as well. We also help facilitate acting work, commercial work, and different endeavors within the music industry, and also in just the artistic scene in general.
Okay, awesome. So you've been doing this for a really long time, right? So before being the director here, you worked at some of the most prestigious agencies in the world, right? Like I just to let everybody know, me and Fuji go way back. Like I
Yeah.
literally Fuji and I have been friends now for probably over 10 years, I would say. So it's been a
Hmm.
really long time. When we do our live events in New York City, Fuji's actually been our guest speaker at our live event, had the opportunity to meet with our talent. We went on a big road trip one time to Detroit, Michigan. We had a big event out there. So
Yeah.
one of the top agents from New York City, in Detroit, Michigan, meeting with talent. But as a talent scout at that time and point in your life, you used to go to lots of different events all over the world, right? Like I've seen you like at almost every single different convention. What is the reasons like why somebody would go to something like that to find talent? Like what is like the expectations you have when you go there? And then do you find talent? Do you find the talent that are there? It's just really not ready. Like what are some of the things, kind of just take me through the eyes of being a talent scout, so to speak.
Right. I mean, very often when it's you're flying in from another country often, or you're coming directly from New York after like a huge workload, and you're going to these events. A lot of times it's very hit or miss. You're not sure if you're going to find the talent, if it's going to be a fruitful trip, and as far as directly meeting talent, of course you always try to optimize the opportunity and meet with like different agents and
You're
stuff like
networking
that.
while you're there. Yeah.
Right, totally. But yeah, you never really know what you're gonna get when you do those kinds of events. But again, you have to try and feel out what's go for it. But what I like with you guys is that I get to spend more time with the talent, and sometimes you'll meet a model and you're like, oh my god, they're beautiful, and it's a little bit, the more you talk to them, it's a little bit like, oh, bring a book, because it's, the personality isn't there, I'll say.
Yeah.
um but with your events, what I like is that I get to talk a little bit more, and sometimes it's the opposite. Sometimes you're a little unsure, you're like, and then the more you speak to the talent, the more, hopefully charming, and you see personality or something of interest, which the industry now isn't just necessarily, of course aesthetics help, but also a story and a little bit about yourself, and something that just makes you interesting helps. And you could, as an agent, you see another layer to the person and the talent. um and I've signed many models, starting off apprehensive, and then the more I talk to them, I'm like, this person's gonna be charming, or this story's gonna be cool, and I think we can make this work. And I've had a lot of success with that approach.
Okay, so when you're signing somebody, there's a lot of time that you may have to spend with that person to get them up to speed. Like, let me give you an example. Let's say we're going to do two different scenarios here. One is you have a girl, I don't know, 5'10", flawless. She's 18 years old, just flew in from like, the Soviet Union or something like that. She's literally high fashion. She's got a great look. She's never done any modeling before, but she walks into your door. Like, what would be the process for you? So, like, just so she hasn't even opened her mouth yet. You don't know anything, but you're like, wow, if I was to start calling some clients, based on her looks, I see maybe I could send her out to Prada, or I could send her out to Gucci, or whoever it may be, right?
Right.
What is like the process for you to decide, hey, this girl is the right girl? Like, what's like the first questions you ask? Like, what do they need to do? Like, she's obviously, is she here on a work visa? Does she have some place to live? Like, what's going to be the process for that?
Right. Well, there's of course the actual logistics of getting them here or keeping the talent here, which, like you mentioned, is visas, the basics, accommodations and stuff like that. Um, but I go back to kind of, well, first of all, they have to have the basic skill of being able to pose and walk and do the meat of the job. And of course, that's one of the more important things that I look at, but there's also that ability to be charming and professional and engaging with clients, and really win them over, because the competition is so stiff that I guess I'm gauging whether they can compete with the rest of the talent, because New York is very much like the Olympic Village of modeling. Everyone from all over the world comes here to compete for the gold. um and what sets you apart, and have you been training, and do you have the basic skills, and can you again complete the basics of the job and then build on that as well. So that's the first thing that I look at. A lot of times there's talent that needs to be developed, and walking lessons, and getting the right images and stuff like that. And sometimes, and very rarely, there's the opposite, where it's a complete new face that can really book everything off the jump, just off a few digitals that I take with my phone. It's very rare, but it does happen. So it's very case by case. But again, besides the basic general, like, aesthetics and measurements and things like that, as far as for high fashion, generic high fashion, which runway and things like that. Editorial, now we see like a changing landscape, and there's a little bit more wiggle room, and we see a little bit more inclusivity, as well for the runway to a certain capacity, with less, not the same amount of numbers as for straight sizes. um but yeah, in a nutshell, that's kind of the first thing that I'm looking at.
Okay. So I think that's just some great points, because here's how I envision it. Because obviously we speak to a lot of different agencies. I always envision it like, if I'm running the agency, I'm the director. My main job is the clients. Like, I'm just, what I mean? Like, I'm bringing in new clients. I'm keeping my old clients happy. So the last thing I want is, like, if somebody's coming in the door, like, I want somebody who's like actually already a model. And I think you kind of hinted at that, because like, if you're brand new and you walk in, you don't have a book, or which, for those of you who don't know what a book is, like a portfolio where you've actually been out doing test shoots. Maybe you've got some tear sheets. I know a lot of models, like, if you had somebody who came in and maybe they did some work in Miami, they did some work in LA, maybe they started off in a smaller market, and then maybe they went off to, Europe, and they're working in Milan and Paris and so forth, and they built this book over a period of a year to 2 years, and then they walk in. That's somebody that you're going to feel a lot more confident
Yeah.
in, because now that they already have an established work record,
Right.
versus somebody who says, hey, yesterday I was thinking about being, an airline stewardess, but now today all of a sudden I want to try modeling. Where then if it doesn't work out, you've now put in all this time and energy and development, and it's just going to be, something that you just know from experience that this is just not a great idea. Like, does that happen? Like, where right, you're going to lean towards the person who's already has something. Like, if it's something, when it says models wanted, it means I'm looking for models. I'm not looking for models wannabes. It doesn't say
Right.
models wannabes. It actually says models, meaning it's like if I call the doctor, I expect a doctor, not somebody who says, well, I'm thinking about being a doctor. Maybe I'll just come over to your house and, we could try some operations, see how it goes. Like
Right.
that's, my funny way of seeing how these things work.
No,
Okay.
totally. It's very often I've been doing this now. It sounds crazy to say it out loud, but 12 years. Um, and in every agency that I worked at, from Wilhelmina to IMG, often we have taken models on who from the beginning, maybe there was, slight apprehension or something, but then we see that they have all the materials and they have images, and either those are images that we can use in our market, or that display that they can do the actual job, and it's been one of those conversations. Well, she already has the beginning of a book, or he already has the beginning of the book, so let's, what's the worst that can happen? Let's take them on. So those things are very persuasive to an agent, seeing that someone's prepared, and it's a plus if they already have the materials as well to start off with.
Okay. So now, so like for I deal with a lot of talent, and a lot of times when I first will interview them, and yeah, obviously we interview people for the opportunity to meet with people such as yourself. A lot of them, they come to me and they're like a train wreck. Like they like somehow they managed to hire a photographer in their local market, and they look like they did some glamour shots. Like the photos are just not like the photos are good for grandma.
Right.
Grandma loves them, and their mom loves them, and dad loves them, and they're good for
Right.
holiday giveaways. But for
Right.
walking into an agency, I've rarely ever never seen somebody who comes in with the proper photos. So for talent, like I think a lot of times they make these mistakes. They're spending a lot of money trying to get this career going, and then they're just kind of like wasting money. Because when you're a talent, not only do you have to have your photos, you have to have your book, you have to have, if you whatever agency you're going to sign for, you're going to be responsible for comp cards, or especially when the world opens up, you're responsible for show cards if you're doing high fashion. Show cards, for those of you who don't know, are like a little bit more fancier comp cards that are sent out, prior to Fashion Week and so forth. Um, so based upon that, and then when I do see professional photos and I see, whoa, like these photos are phenomenal. Like, oh my God, this person hit it. My first question is always oh, how did you find this photographer?
Yeah, me
Who were
too.
you currently signed with? Like,
Yeah, yeah,
because
yeah.
there was somebody there. And now a red flag goes up in my head. Well, wait a second. If you already had an agent, why are you now looking for somebody else? Right.
Right.
So
Right.
there's that. How do you handle that when that person's sitting in front of you, and you kind of, they're kind of skirting the issue? Like, do they lie to you, or do they just come clean? Like, what's the reason there's like a model who's out in the wild who was with some other agency, and now somehow they're sitting in front of you? Like, tell me that kind of scenario.
Right. Well, it's always a red flag, and I'm always apprehensive, because once in a very rarely you will find a model that immediately gets it and gets the aesthetic of what, especially what the New York market is looking for. But I always ask, like, who shot this? Oh, how did you connect with them and stuff like that? Just like you said. And there's also the red flag of, often, it eventually I find out that they're working with like another agency and stuff like that. And I think, was there a problem? You're not happy with them? What's going on? So, and then you start kind of forming this narrative in your head as well too. So I always say you only get one chance at saying hello, that's also me branding the agency. Hello. Um, but you want to make sure that that is the strongest kind of hello and representation of who you are that you can perform. You know what I mean? So, starting off with the right images, the right, just general direction is very key, because you only get, again, one introduction to the market. as far as New York, and also very secondary markets as well, like Los Angeles and Miami, Chicago, because it really is a core of just, you know, several casting directors and agencies too that handle those markets at a serious level. So when you start off kind of off the jump looking a little, you know, questionable or tainted or
Yeah.
sketchy decision making or moves and stuff like that, um, you know, it can create an air of doubt and apprehension as well. And there's so many more layers to that too. Like, well, who did they meet when they were working with this last agency? Did they see this group of like not so flattering images, or you know what I mean? So like it's the introduction is really important, I guess, is what I'm saying, you know, especially in the high fashion arena where it is such a small core group of key decision makers.
So now, okay, so here's another question I always get too. Well, not really a question that I get personally, because a lot of times the models I deal with are not at that level, but like I see a lot of castings obviously come through our offices and so forth. And like I'll see something like, like a one-page spread in like an Elle magazine or something like that. And I'll look and I'll see like the pay scale for it is like $150 or something. Like it's very, very low. But then all of a sudden I'll be walking in Times Square and I'll see like the new face of, Calvin Klein or the new face of whatever. And, I'll kind of follow up on who's representing them and so forth. And I'll find out like, like that was like a $200,000 job or something. What is the difference between somebody who's like booking? Cause like I know a lot of models will get signed to some huge agencies in New York City, but over the course of that first year, they're really not making enough to even cover the cost of living in New York City, while
Right.
somebody else just comes in and they hit that home run. Obviously there's years of development and time that may have went into that person, but people never see that. They always just see the end result. What's the difference between a girl or a guy who's booking $300 a day jobs versus somebody who's able to book five or six or $10,000 a day jobs? Like, they both have that same look. It just comes down to the personality. Does it come down like what separates the two? Like, how does somebody rise to become that Tyson Beckford or become that household name, so to speak, or land that cover? Or what happens when you land? You become the face of Calvin Klein for the next 6 months. Now that campaign's over. Well, why would another designer want to hire you? Like, you were the face of Calvin Klein. Why would Tommy Hilfiger want to put you in their ads? Like, how does that all work? So kind
Right.
of like a two-part question there.
Right. Totally.
Sometimes like blowing up overnight, could that hurt your career? You know what I mean? So the
Right.
difference is for that. And then also like, what's the difference between somebody who's only booking a few $100s versus somebody who's booking the higher end jobs? Like, I'm trying to like, how can I have the best career in this business for long-term, stuff versus just being a flash in the pan. I come to New York for a year or two. I go out for some drinks. I did some photo shoots, and now I'm back in, the middle of the United States,
Albuquerque.
yeah,
Back.
exactly, back in Albuquerque,
Yeah.
working at Walmart or something.
Right. Right. I think there's so many like facets to that question or to the answer. Um, but I think initially it really comes down to the management team and the development process as well, and just kind of the being selective about which jobs the talent does. There's a lot of like politics and stuff like that. Like, you can do a very commercial job for a decent chunk of change, but it cut you out for maybe certain more high fashion luxury jobs. Uh, so for myself, I'll answer that for myself. My approach is always thinking long term and longevity. Like I can go for the quick, I don't know, 5 grand super commercial job, but then I have to realize that may cut out uh, down the line higher paying editorials and or regular advertising jobs that could be more lucrative. So it also is a case by case basis. So, you know, not everyone's going to have the same trajectory or the same kind of career goals as the other models. So it's also having the management that can educate you on the process. So, you know why you're turning down a certain job, and why you're doing another job, maybe for less money, but for the prestige, so that you can down the line build on that, you know, editorially or again, advertising wise. So that's where management or you know, people like you, for example, that either know the ins and outs of the industry or can have all those references when you don't know, you know, because sometimes there's decisions that need to be made that, you know, even in a shifting, especially now in a shifting landscape of the fashion industry, maybe these same rules and politics kind of don't apply at the moment, or are changing because of the economy and COVID. So just to be able to have that direction and be explained how things work, and why maybe you're doing a job for less money, but because of the name attached behind it, it'll lead to more opportunities down the line. Or sometimes why you're doing something because it pays exceptionally well too. So it's very case by case, but that's where if you don't have management or anyone to reference, you know, you can make a decision that will, again, like you said, lead you to being a flash in the pan. So having that guidance and all these references in various industries is really important.
Yeah, you know, obviously we get a lot of people reach out to us all day long. So for years, I always get people who, especially, well, not for years, but like probably the past couple of years since, you know, since Instagram has taken off so well, I
Right.
will literally check my DMs and I will literally have anywhere from 20 to 100 DMs from people who are interested in modeling per se, but they'll actually say they're a model, and I'll be like, oh, great. You know, so who's your representation? Well, they say like, well, no, I'm a freelancer. I'm like, oh my God, you're a freelancer. How wonderful. I'm like, all right, well, just send me over your insurance information for COVID. Make sure you send me over your LLC. Make sure you send me over what your usage rights are. And I just give them this whole list of things that an agent would be handling. Literally, I must have responded back to about 1,000 people. And I've never had one single freelancer ever like write me back. And then,
Right.
of course, you always just click on their Instagram, and of course, like you see them doing absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
Like, what do you think the mindset is? Like, is it just like because people can take selfies that they just like somehow think they're a model? Like, I never understood that. Like, to me, it's just like I'm either I am who I am. I'm either a drummer or I'm not a drummer.
Right.
Like,
Right.
it's just like, and it's just like most people, they don't realize, like, without an agent, like a client will never there's no client who's going to speak to you. Maybe like some local, you know, accountant in the middle of nowhere who just, there's no agencies for a million miles or something. But like, I just don't, like, there's no way. There's so much going on. There's so much that you have to account for. Like, it's just not just showing up, but like, you know, and insurance, what happens if the model doesn't show up, and, you know, what the COVID regulations and travel expenses, and just, you know, a million little things, you know, what happened, you know, even with TV and film, you know, keeping your hair the same way and not making changes, because if there has to be a reshoot, you have to, you know, like, there's all these things that go on. You know, will the image just be used in one magazine? Will it be used for e-com and so forth? So like I you know, kind of give us that maybe 100,000-foot view of all the things that you have to do, and why a client would never hire a freelancer. Why that's just, it's like brand ambassadors online. That's another thing. Oh, I want you to be a brand ambassador. Click this link and buy my shirt, and you get 20% off, and send us a picture and we'll post it. Like, that's
Right.
not a brand ambassador. That's a customer. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. No,
you
totally. And I get those things too. Like,
yeah, I get them all day long
yeah.
too. There's
Yeah,
literally, there must be like 1,000 people in the Philippines getting paid like 25 cents an hour just to send out messages to every single person. Like they
right,
literally hit just all day like
right.
that. So yeah, so tell me a little bit about that. Tell me like that 100,000 foot view of all the things that you have to do when booking a job.
I mean, it's so much. And it's really like either you're an agent, and if you're doing it on your own, like it's just information that you're not privy to, like details of like what is proper usage, what is a force majeure, what is in perpetuity mean, and um and again, just knowing what is appropriate for the X amount of money that you're getting, offered. But going before that, back to kind of the beginning of your question, um I think Instagram has made it seem like it's very easy to live off of just that, and often I get the same request as like, as well from like talent of like, oh, I'm a model, this and that, and like, you uh even 50,000 followers isn't much in the
Mhm.
scope of like, your competition, and people that are seriously doing this and making a living off of it. It's little, I've had talent that have 200,000 followers. And even then, what certain companies were offering wasn't a lot. Luckily this talent had actual background in fashion and editorials and campaigns and stuff like that. But you know, that's to say that if you don't have those prior editorials or campaigns or runway shows and stuff like that, like, it's difficult. So, um, yeah,
And also
it's
the followers too, like for most people don't realize just because you have 1 million followers or 50,000 followers, it doesn't mean anything to the client because are those followers people who are going to buy your product?
right, right. Well, that's another beast in itself. And I guess where I'm having a hard time like focusing with the answer is that there's so many different layers to it, which goes back to like you need someone that knows the ins and outs. Who's your audience? What are the um markets or I guess the cities that they're primarily your audience is coming from, and when you're asked this by a brand, can you answer confidently? For a lot of my talent, I know one, for example, the target audience is 18 to 34, and that's in New York, LA, London, and Jakarta. I don't know where Jakarta comes in.
Mhm.
I don't know about Jakarta, honestly. But I know, I know this information, and I know that that translates into a high fashion, more luxury oriented market where I can demand or not or request, demand sounds bossy, a higher rate, and I know to keep the image at a certain level. Um yeah, etc, because I could go on with details. um so yeah, and in the grand scheme of things, like getting like an ambassador code or promotional thing, like, not to sound like snobbish, but don't feel special, you know what I mean? Like that's just another marketing ploy. um and and then also too, what kind of image are you putting out there, and how do you know what kind of image to put out there to attract those high end customers or those high paying customers? It doesn't have to be high end. Everyone has a different kind of level, but it can be high paying commercial clients as well, but again, with each of these audiences, you have to have a certain aesthetic, and it's very rare. I was going to say that young people, but I think people in general know what direction to go in with this aesthetic, and also put in the effort as well, like, if you're gonna put a picture of yourself on Instagram, and this is your goal, make sure it's a polished image. Make sure you have a look together, make sure that your hair is groomed and the lighting is well, and all these little details that really that customer looks to. Um I don't want to give away too much,
No,
but
no, no, no. I agree. I definitely give
no,
it.
but it's
No,
important.
because
All these things,
here's a
you know
great
what I
question.
mean?
When you talk
Like,
about social media, this is something I always think about. Like the first thing I always do is, somebody approaches me, I look at their social media, and I'm like, oh my god, this person's like a train wreck. Like there's just
right,
their photos are all over the place. There's no consistency there. So let's just say now, that person comes in and they're going to start working with you. What do? Do you just delete that old account? Do you start a new account? Like, what's the time frame to start building up the account so it looks like it's a talent that's represented by your particular agency, right? Because each agency, when you kind of, if you follow all the different models, because success leaves clues, you can kind of feel the look. You know what I mean? Like
right,
Boss Models has a look versus IMG has a certain look, and
right,
the images, you could see there's a very interesting choreography going on how those images are posted.
right,
Obviously, if you're in charge, you got 40 models or 400 models on your board that you're representing and you're in charge of. What's like the science? And don't, obviously you don't want to give away secrets here because I know agencies are very competitive, but like what's the process to even begin that? Does a model just delete her account? Like, what
right,
do you do to try and control that image that she's putting out there?
right. And I feel like this is something that I say not just in industry world and in my industry world, but also in general. It's about editing. Um, you
You
have
don't mean
to.
filters. You mean
Yeah,
actual
well, you
editing.
have to like really take a look and see, what you want to put your strongest things out there, and this is true to like your wardrobe, you know what I mean? Every 6 months take a look at it. That's what I do, and edit it down to what is beneficial and makes you feel good, or presents yourself well and stuff like that. To your images, like I can't say how many times I'll see an Instagram page that just looks janky, it just looks like terrible lighting. There's a bunch of shit in the background. Pardon my French, sorry. Um, or like the floor is all dusty. Like that. You don't see, you kind of have to have that mindset. Okay, I'll use myself for an example. Obviously I'm not talent, but I knew I had to do this with you. And this is just me keeping it real. I wasn't wearing this sweater before, you know what I mean? And like I didn't have jewelry, and I was like doing laundry and on work calls and like running around in like a ratty was still like a rock t-shirt, but whatever. You know what I mean? So like I'm presenting myself so that if you blast this anywhere, it's the best representation of me that I can give you. You know what I mean? There's nothing in the background. It's a sweater. I'm wearing jewelry, and I'm a little bit groomed as much as I can. So I think, not to make it about me or anything, but like, you have to put your strongest self forward and project that. Um and there's this like cheesy saying in the industry, like you got to look good to book good, and that's the industry, and that's just as an agent. Like for a talent, you have to level it up and get creative, and like, and I always say this as well, we live in the information age. Like you can access anything at any time. There's no excuse why, if you're trying to be an actor, a musician, a model, whatever, that you don't have the references to put a strong representation of yourself together. And that's whether you're playing the guitar on video, to like you're taking selfies at home, to a monologue too, like everything has to be polished, especially when your competition is, the internet opened things up where you're competing now against everyone, millions and millions, maybe billions of people. So like, why is someone going to look at your materials of you like in your janky looking living room with like a bunch of crap in the background, and you're not wearing your best, and you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, no, I know. Like the Kardashians, they're $1 billion brand,
right,
and like when you look at their Instagram, like they're like they look like they're just naturally going through their day, and you'll see mixed with the professional photos. But every single photo on there, there's like I think a team of like 6 or 8 people who are running that Instagram. Like they're not actually posting those pictures. Those pictures get taken and then they're sent over to somebody who's editing them, and then kind of choosing the best ones, planning out the storylines
right,
and so
right,
forth.
right.
So people don't realize that there's so much to this, and you really I think, you know, you have to be like your own entrepreneur. You have to understand everything. It's just not, you got to understand lighting and
Yeah,
photography
and
and
you have to
branding
study
and
things too, like
messaging.
yeah, it's and you have to study things, like you have to reference other successful people and kind of create your own personalized version of that, you know, like you from lighting to like so many times going back to what you said, like people they're like, oh, I'm a model, blah blah, and like you're wearing some like washed out Hollister t-shirt and like you know what I mean, and some like
Yeah.
cruddy sneakers. And listen, I don't mind a cruddy sneaker if it's a cool cruddy sneaker, but you know what I mean? But and like you're in your yard and there's a bunch like I can see your wire fence. You know what I mean? Like,
Hmm.
and we probably all have that wire fence. And listen, it's an illusion to a certain extent, but that's the business, you know. And being aware of that too, you know. Don't now I'm going to take a little bit of a mental health approach to realize that that's not your reality. This isn't what you have to strive for in real life, but it's just like going on a job interview. You know, you put your best self forward, you put on your best suit or your best dress, you have your best resume. So in this industry, all these little things are the best representation of you, whether it's images or music or videos or whatever. Like you want it to be so produced but yet organic that it looks like something that you could just already kind of promote, you know. That an agent, for example, would be like, yes, let's do this, you get it. I'm confident that if I have to ask you for self digitals or whatever, especially now during COVID times, you know, that this person can produce that. So there's so many facets of like presenting the strongest version of yourself in entertainment, and I think in just life in general.
We did an online kind of little meet and greet with talent. We tried to explain to them the importance of taking digitals, and
Right.
I'm literally, we must have, I couldn't even tell you the amount of hours. Actually, Ryan, you know, Ryan's also one of the agents we work with. For those of you not familiar, Fuji knows Ryan,
I love
but he
them.
must have literally spent 4 weeks trying to get everyone to take good digitals, and like they all failed. Like
Yeah.
literally, the very end, they started getting it. And I think most people don't realize, like, just something as simple as taking digitals to get it right. It's actually, it seems like it should be so easy, right? It's kind of like
Yeah.
tying your shoelaces. Like, you know, it seemed like I could do this, but until somebody kind of showed me and I had to practice for a little
Right.
while, it's, or riding a bike. It's, oh, I just have to pedal. It's not like there's like a science to that,
Yes,
literally.
and there's research too. Listen, my lighting right now, this shadow driving me crazy. You know what I mean? But I'm
Hmm.
working with the constraints of my space, of
Yeah.
course. But but still, like, you know, this lighting and everything, like, I'm still trying to present my strongest self. You're nicely lit. You know what I mean? Like all these little things kind of add up. Um, and I think ultimately it just shows a dedication, you know, like if we kind of uh reduce it a little bit down to the bare bones, it's like it shows that you have a basic knowledge and understanding of self-branding and producing your own content, which is huge, you know. Business of fashion is projecting that you know, most advertisements are going to be through social media personalities of different kind of platforms, but you know, and even knowing that, like that's research of talent, we all have access to that, you know what I mean? It's a free newsletter. Like there's in the age of information, there's no excuse for putting out like subpar content in any regard.
Now, like, if you were, oh, so here's another question I always think about too. If I was brand new, right, say, and I was starting out in the industry, is New York this place to be still, or like, should I consider going to Dubai or Japan or throughout, you know, throughout Asia? You know, say I'm like, you know, a Western look, say, right? Would is that going to be? Is there better of a shot of me? You know, South Africa, like, is there better for me to start in Europe, or is New York still like where I want to kick my career off, so to speak? Obviously, you know, I went through some development. I have my book together. I'm ready to do this. I feel I'm ready to start going out and meeting with clients. I got the personality. Should I go to New York, or is there a benefit to going to Dubai or someplace else in the world and starting there?
Right. That's a good question. It all kind of this depends on the response that your agent is getting or feels like you might get, and your look too. So it's all very, it should be, all very kind of tailored specifically to the talent and personality and stuff like that. With just past experience, I can say that there's been many a top models, like household names, that seem like they just kind of suddenly blew up here in New York, but actually developed in Asia and got a strong book together. The turnaround time in Asia is very fast for editorial, where you'll shoot something here. Sometimes it can come out like, a few months ahead of time. In Asia, you can go for a month, and by the time you're back, the publication's probably already out, and the quality is good enough to compete in New York. But again, it all depends. Once in a while, we see that girl or guy that just kind of hits, and is supported by all the casting directors here. Or sometimes there's that apprehension. They kind of disappear and develop in another market and come back with a strong book or materials, and the response is there, and they're kind of, the casting directors here are like convinced now that they can support them, and that there will be a response with their clients.
Now, speaking of like that, seeing what works and what doesn't work, I've recently seen like a lot of absolutely stunning trans models, and a
Right.
lot of now, like, literally it was on the cover of Playboy and representing some major brands. How is that affecting like the mix of everything right now?
Right. I think to kind of even take a step back from just trans, I think we see that response um in different marginalized communities in general. We see it plus size,
Plus size,
people of
huge.
color.
Mhm.
Right. And plus size, obviously has always been there, but it wasn't always representative of the Black or brown girls,
Mhm.
um and we're seeing a lot more Asian representation as well, which, if you really think about it, like 10 years, it wasn't as prominent. It
Yeah,
was
no,
more.
if you're a person of ethnicity, this is the best time to be alive for fashion, commercial, editorial, TV, film. This is
Right.
like such a huge market right now. Like you
Yeah,
said,
yeah.
10 years ago, you did not see this at all.
Right. And I think what it comes down to is we're seeing the movement of inclusivity um being more opened up and becoming more mainstream. And I think it's been a slow process, but considering the current political climate, I'll say, um, I think that it's ushered in a movement that um is more accepting to it. And I guess what I'm saying is hopefully will be the norm and mainstream, like I've had my personal issues with the industry. Um, but I've had to remind myself that ultimately it's the client's request of what they want. And all I can do is introduce new talent to open the doors at least, and try to get more diverse talent in the mix. Um, but now, whether it's social movement, and being completely blunt, maybe pandering to this new customer, which I think brands are realizing are people of color, um uh, or giving that perception. Regardless, I'm Puerto Rican, so it's really important too, that we take this opportunity and not just let it be a flash in the pan, but make it the norm. Um, so yeah, it's opening things up slowly but surely, and I think the more representation we see, and kind of humanizing this talent, these trans people, non-gender conforming, non-binary, plus size, uh it's it opens things up more. But again, that's and which is great, but these new marginalized communities that the industry is opening onto still have to put their best foot forward, and you still have to have that polished image, and you're still competing against that skinny blonde white girl, so like it's not to say that we should just sit back.
But even
and,
like
and
with the trans models, the ones that you see that are obviously, landing the covers and landing the things, they're like stunning. Like they are so gorgeous. Is there like that? But not all trans models look like that. Just like regular models, is there like that conflict there too, where the clients are catering towards that ultimate beauty when the average consumer may not have that in that you know what I mean, like that whole psychology, is that still, does it
right,
following through with everything? You know what I mean? Because you also see like these, ads for real models and people who are more realistic, but it's not applying to luxury brands. Luxury brands are still, about that perfect look versus, E-Trade or, whatever, spring water and so forth, that will
right.
have more of a variety of people in there. So I still think there's like that market that's not being, kind of catered to, or the people who are looking at it, they're aspiring to be that person in the ad. Like, what, is it the psychological aspect? You know what I mean? Like, what's the
Right.
thought on that?
Right. Well, I think beauty will always be beauty, and there is a science to it. And I think whether that you're trans, plus, black, brown, purple, whatever, Um, but then there's also kind of this genre of the anti-fashion models as well, which is a little bit more, I don't want to say highbrow, um, but a little bit more artistic, and we have male models doing big things that, are missing a front tooth, um, or girls with wide bridged noses, exceptionally wide bridged noses and stuff like that. Um, so I think it very much also depends on your lane in the fashion industry as well, and even commercial and stuff like, or acting, um, and knowing, where you fit in that genre, But I think classic beauty, regardless of race, gender, whatever, will always be kind of classic beauty,
Yeah, it moves through time. There's that
Right,
certain look, whether it's 1,000 years ago or 1,000 years from now. There's just that
right,
face that
right.
just.
Well, I mean, look at Tracy Africa. Like, she did a bunch of hair. She booked hair jobs and did like the packaging in the 70s. Um, she's a trans model, and at the time, obviously, it wasn't as accepted. But she booked that job not knowing the client, not knowing that she was trans, and then she was outed, which caused this like outrage across America and maybe the world, I'm not sure. And they pulled the packaging, But if you really think about it, she was beautiful and is beautiful enough to be on that packaging, regardless of the trans thing and stuff like that. So I think I say that to emphasize that like beauty will always be beauty, regardless of these labels that society puts on us, or even how the labels that we put on ourselves and project that, like I think that'll still always be the case. um Whether you have all these, I don't want to say extenuating circumstances, but like these societal norms that are like pressed on us,
And now, obviously we're going through a unique time of our lives here with how the world's shifting. Where do you see the industry going like a year from now when the world reopens up? Like, there's going to be a shift. Like, obviously luxury brands will always be luxury brands, but do you see like how like anything that's like, is it now more e-com is starting to develop more versus print and so forth? Do you think print will always have a place in the industry, or will it now be dominated more by e-com, or like where do you see things like headed? You know what I mean? Like, obviously right now if you're in New York, there's really no point in getting a $400,000 a month billboard in Times Square, because you're not getting that viewership that you would get under normal circumstances. So like, where do you see things changing with how these brands will compensate models, or where they're going to be advertising and how they're reaching their market? Or do you see things just kind of, hey, the world is where it is, and when it opens back up, everything's just going to kind of go back to normal? Or is there something you see that will be a shift that, you being, a director, and running a powerful agency, is kind of aware of, or trying to gauge where the world is headed?
Right. I mean, it's hard to say because I think what we've learned this year is that things can change and, we might not be ready for it. It's how you adapt and how quickly you adapt. And I think we're all still just, again, my approach is very real. I think we're all still figuring out how to adapt. Um, and maybe even implementing how we're gonna adapt to the rest of the industry. So I think it's still a work in progress, and we're all still learning. But I think without a doubt, what we're gonna see is a shift more towards consumers being more digitally based, and more internet based, which will mean more advertising on social media platforms from TikTok to Instagram. YouTube is still, I don't know, in my opinion, a little shaky.
Yeah.
But it's still there's still enough revenue. So again, that's more of my projections, but who knows.
I know,
And
like Gucci, I have my own personal virtual shopper now. So I can go
right,
on the Gucci site, and I have a virtual shopper who will take me around, show me everything, and literally
right,
wrap it, and it's like on its way and sitting in my, doorstep the next day. So,
right.
I've seen little things like that, which I kind of now, at first I was like, oh, that's a little bit weird. Like, I kind of want to go to the store and buy it. But then I was like, oh, I'm kind of enjoying this. And now I
Right.
save the time of going back and forth to, the mall, and, just, I'm still getting the product that I want, because obviously, whatever the latest sneaker is, or, whatever it may be. So I thought that myself, I saw, was something that was interesting.
Right. Yeah, totally. I guess what we're realizing now is that to do a bulk of our work, we don't necessarily have to be in the office anymore,
Yeah.
and to do work aside, even our shopping and stuff like that, to your point. Um, so I think we're going to see a lot more kind of personalized and direct advertising based more digitally, which I think we'll see it opening more up to internet just kind of personalities, um but for sure I think we'll all be working more from home to a certain capacity, um and advertising and things like that will be geared more towards that avenue.
Yeah.
And well, if you're at the Gucci store, feel free to pick me up stuff like online. I'll send you a list. I have a list.
Excellent.
Yeah. Okay.
I love
No
that.
pressure.
All right. Well, I know you're busy, and we've kind
Uh,
of went way over our time limit.
oh,
And I
whatever.
know I could literally do this for hours. Like, me
Yeah,
and you
me too. I could
talk
talk
about
and
this
talk.
for hours and hours and hours and hours. So if you got to listen to this, I hope you did enjoy it. But it was kind of a little teaser, for those of you who are actually going to be attending our modeling acting boot camp, or you actually just attended this. It's a little bonus content for you to enjoy. And hopefully you'll have the opportunity to meet Fuji at our future events, or maybe actually get to work with him one-on-one, and so forth. You never know, right?
Mhm.
Anything is possible.
It's true.
So again, I want to thank you very much, Mr. Fuji Ruiz, for being here today. And you've been listening to Hollywood Mindset TV and the VIP Ignite Live podcast. Have a great night, guys.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.